Luke Atkin was once a celebrated champion in bare-knuckle boxing, a local hero who shocked England by winning 2 world titles in 2018. Today, however, he is more infamous as a British crime lord who vanished without a trace at the height of a major drugs trial. How did this ex-fighter go from parring in blood-stained rings to leading a £1 million cocaine empire? How did he manage to slip the tightest British dragnet? And how did the long arm of the law finally reel him in? This is the jaw-dropping story of Luke Atkin. Let's take a look. It goes without saying that Luke Atkin was born for a fight. From the age of 11, he was punching at local boxing gyms, quietly racking up regional schoolboy titles. Coaches called him ice in his veins, calm, disciplined, and merciless when the bell rang. By the time he was a teenager, he'd won multiple amateur honors and even fought for England's youth teams, but life outside the ring was a different fight. In 2006, a boy on the cusp of greatness landed in a maximum security jail. Atkin was convicted of grievous bodily harm and handed a 5-year sentence, an ordeal that took a heavy toll on his family. His father, who had introduced him to boxing as a child, was reportedly driven to break down upon hearing the news. Prison might have ended lesser careers, but for Atkin, it became a crucible. Remarkably, on release he poured himself back into fighting, picking up where he left off. Fans would later recall how a hardened Luke Atkin laced up gloves with a vengeance that belied the boy who had been locked away. In May 2018, he achieved a feat few had anticipated, winning not 1, but 2 world bare-knuckle boxing titles in Coventry, becoming the champion at both heavyweight and cruiserweight. Photos of Atkin from that era show a hulking man with a gladiator's physique, throwing perfect punches and wearing a championship belt, the pride of Warrington, on his shoulders. He was no showman. His nickname was simple, Loose Cannon, but in the ring, he let his fists do the talking. Yet there was a dark undercurrent to his story that no commentator mentioned at those heady moments. The fame and respect of bare-knuckle boxing could be exhilarating, but it didn't pay nearly enough to satisfy some ambitions. And when Atkin walked away from the sport, other opportunities began to creep in. By 2020, he was seeing bigger paydays coming from a very different arena. Behind closed doors in Warrington and the drug-plagued neighborhoods of York and Nottingham, Atkin began to weave a new network. Law enforcement sources later revealed that he had become a key player in a narcotic syndicate that flooded York and Tadcaster with cocaine. In other words, while fans remembered him for championship belts, undercover agents saw him leading a multi-million-pound drug ring. North Yorkshire and Cheshire police gradually pieced together the extraordinary scale of his operation. Investigators found encrypted messages and unusual bank transactions. Covert officers observed couriers shuttling back and forth between London, the Netherlands, and Yorkshire. A raid in the summer of 2023 by North Yorkshire Police's organised crime unit seized enormous quantities of Class A drugs. £43,000 of high-purity cocaine was even found stuffed into a single taxi during one bust. Each clue pointed closer to Atkin. In the fall, after months of surveillance, detectives moved in. They arrested him on conspiracy charges. Atkin was accused of coordinating the supply of heroin, crack, and cocaine as part of the gang. Court documents described him as more than a foot soldier, a link in the chain that ran from South American cartels to British streets. The case that unfolded in court was damning. The gang's boss, Gavin Toohey from Tadcaster, pleaded guilty to importing kilos of cocaine. Other lieutenants admitted to shipping drugs across county lines. When it was Atkin's turn, prosecutors presented text records, phone taps, and witness statements tying him to dozens of drug runs. The evidence was so strong that in October 2024, Bradford Crown Court convened to sentence the syndicate, except Luke Atkin never showed up. To the astonishment of onlookers, he'd vanished. The press reported that Atkin informed the court he would not be attending the first day of trial and flew out of the UK. In other words, the courtroom called his name, and got only an empty chair. Within hours, British police had issued a bench warrant and alerted authorities worldwide. North Yorkshire police appealed publicly for help, warning, "It is believed that he has travelled abroad and may be in Thailand." Atkin was officially a fugitive, and the hunt was on. News of Atkin's disappearance spread instantly. Detectives pored over airline and passport records, and police forces across countries were notified through Interpol. One report noted that his associates in York and Tadcaster had already been sentenced to long terms, while defiant Atkin skipped his trial, opting for a hasty exit from the UK. Press releases and social media appeals carried his photo to every corner of the globe. Investigators chased lead after lead, though many were just speculation. In reality, all the evidence showed he had flown out of Britain on the day of the trial. Months passed with no confirmed sightings. The streetwise boxer had simply vanished off the radar. Speculation quickly zeroed in on Southeast Asia. Thailand in particular was widely suspected as Atkin's hideout. Authorities themselves had mentioned Thailand in their appeals, and British media noted that a foreigner could vanish into Bangkok's crowds. Atkin's own background made the theory plausible. He was a minor celebrity locally, having won 2 bare-knuckle world titles, and he had fought exhibitions abroad. Thailand's bare-knuckle scene was also booming. Regular events in Bangkok, Phuket, and Pattaya are held legally there, so it was easy to imagine Atkin blending into that world. Local press even reported that British police had launched an international manhunt, believing he was hiding out in Thailand. Online sleuths traded wild theories, from hidden computer vans to private jets, but investigators stuck to facts. Outside observers heard nothing but crickets. Privately, officers likely tracked his contacts in Bangkok's gyms and Phuket's bars. To the public, though, the trail had gone cold. For nearly a year after his escape, Luke Atkin lived like a ghost among Bangkok's neon haze. Insiders say he abandoned his flashy street life, no more expensive cars or flashy money signs. Instead, he paid cash for cheap condos in expat-heavy neighborhoods. He maintained a low-key routine, hitting local Muay Thai gyms and sipping iced coffee at the markets. Outwardly, he adopted a new persona, an honest crypto investor or an ex-fighter turned trainer, a story believable enough, because that's all he could risk. Photos on social media showed a smiling Atkin in the background of friends' beach parties and rooftop dinners, always careful not to tag himself. A few tattooed Westerners recognized him and wondered if it was really him, but he made sure to stay just out of frame. Meanwhile, UK intelligence circles had quietly closed in. Investigators were tracking every possibility: bogus passports, circuitous flight paths, payments for vehicles, and even old-school ferry passenger lists. Then, in mid-2024, the breakthrough came unexpectedly. It had nothing to do with high-tech spycraft. It was routine police work. Thai immigration officers picked up a British man for overstaying his visa on a small island and ran his name against Interpol's alerts. The name Luke Atkin popped up on their system. Suddenly, the British fugitive who bragged of being untouchable was caught in a visa check. At 6 a.m. one quiet morning, a Thai arrest team moved in. Sources say Atkin was in a modest hotel near Phuket, following his usual plan of teaching a private boxing class. Without gunfire or alarm, officers quietly swarmed the lobby. According to local media reports, he did not resist. He calmly handed over his passport. The intrepid fugitive even greeted them with a wry grin and a cheeky comment about "took you long enough," as a British detective later quoted, though the exact words were not printed. In a matter of hours, Luke Atkin was under Thai custody. Within days, Thailand had begun the formal process of extraditing him. British newspapers buzzed. Video clips of Atkin in handcuffs in a Bangkok holding cell circulated on social media. Atkin, who once pledged to beat any man who entered the ring with him, now looked small on a television screen, his bold years of strutting the streets momentarily over. Interpol confirmed the red notice, and Thai authorities obliged. He was flown back to the UK under escort. Luke Atkin's return was anticlimactic, yet fateful. On January 28, 2025, he quietly appeared via video link in a London courtroom for what press called a routine matter. Judge Kirsty Watson presided. His defense barrister, Emily Hassel, told the court there was no excuse for his disappearance, only a brief apology from Atkin to the judge for any delay caused. He fully acknowledges the charge of failing to surrender, said the lawyer. Watson listened as the details were recapped. That he had initially been convicted of running a conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, that he had fled his trial, and that his co-conspirators had already begun serving time. The room was silent when she spoke. To that extent, your absence did not obstruct the course of justice, Judge Watson said bluntly. In other words, he couldn't undo what had already been done by simply running away. She reminded the court that his actions did not obstruct justice, but that didn't mean they didn't matter. The case had continued. Sentences were issued. Victims, investigators, and communities had moved on without him. And now that he was back, the system would respond. The punishment was swift. In addition to his original 10-year sentence, handed down in his absence last October, Watson tacked on an extra 4 months for the attempted escape. That extension was largely symbolic. At 37, Atkin will be lucky to see freedom for another decade. Soon after the hearing, he was returned to HMP Wandsworth and later transferred to a high-security prison. Gone is the swagger of the champion. The only fight he faces now is the daily grind of the cell block. Back in Yorkshire and Cheshire, detectives allowed themselves a quiet moment of satisfaction. This was a large and detailed investigation that led to an organized crime gang being dismantled, noted Detective Constable Leah Kitchen, who helped lead the crackdown. Key players have received significant prison sentences that reflect the seriousness of their crimes, she added. And we've stopped tens of thousands of pounds of high-purity Class A drugs hitting the streets. Indeed, Atkin's so-called network had been cut down. The gang leader got over 9 years, others got 8, 6, and so on, totaling more than 50 years between them. Without their logistics mastermind on the loose, street dealers in York and beyond noticed an abrupt change. Supply lines vanished, and turf fights momentarily died down. On paper, that might seem light for someone described as a key figure in a multi-million-pound narcotics ring who deliberately evaded justice. But the answer isn't as simple as the numbers. To understand whether the decision was fair, we need to look at 3 things: the charges, his actions, and the legal system's intent. First, the crime itself. Atkin wasn't charged as the top boss of the operation, but prosecutors argued he was more than just a peripheral player. The conspiracy involved high-purity cocaine and heroin being moved through towns like York and Tadcaster, and Atkin was tied to encrypted phone data, logistics roles, and direct connections to those who were running the supply chain. While others received similar or even longer sentences, his 10-year term fits squarely within the sentencing guidelines for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. It's not unusually harsh. In fact, some might argue it reflects his middle-tier role in the network. Second, his escape. Disappearing ahead of sentencing was not only unlawful, it was deliberate. He wasn't swept up in a panic, he planned it, left the country legally before restrictions could be imposed, and stayed hidden for months. That undermines public trust in the justice system. Defendants who vanish effectively delay closure, for the courts, for the community, and for the other defendants who accepted their punishments. By the time Atkin reappeared via video link in early 2025, he had embarrassed law enforcement and turned a routine sentencing into an international manhunt. So the extra 4 months added by Judge Kirsty Watson, is that enough? Surprisingly, yes. In the UK, failing to surrender is a separate criminal offence, and sentencing for it depends on the context. Atkin had already been sentenced for the original offence in his absence. The additional 4 months was a proportional response for the failure to appear, not a second punishment for the original crime. Legally, it wasn't the judge's job to re-evaluate the 10-year term, only to assess the severity of the absconding. In that context, the penalty was consistent with similar cases. It's also worth considering the court's underlying message. The point wasn't to add dramatic time to Atkin's sentence, it was to reinforce that the system would not be undermined by fugitives. Even if the case continued without him, even if justice was technically delivered in absentia, the law still closed the loop. It reminded the public that no matter how far someone runs, there's still accountability at the end of the road. From a moral standpoint, the fairness lies not just in the number of years, but in the system's balance. Atkin wasn't punished because of the media attention or the optics of his flight, nor was he let off lightly. The decision was firm, restrained, and based on precedent. A reminder that UK courts are guided by law, not spectacle. So was it fair? Yes, it was deliberate, measured, and grounded in the facts. The sentence held Atkin accountable for his crimes, penalized him for the escape, and upheld the integrity of the system without turning the case into a show trial. And perhaps more importantly, it delivered a quiet warning to anyone thinking of running next. You can delay the system, but you cannot outrun it. Even in prison, Atkin's legend lingers online. Some tabloids mock the Loch Ness Monster of Warrington, while others treat him as a strange sort of anti-hero. Meanwhile, students of crime note that Atkin made every mistake a fugitive can. He lived moderately well, making offshore accounts, ties in different countries, but still sent the occasional cash wire back home. He hung around places where people might recognize him. He slipped only when cornered by local police checking visas. The moral is plain. He may have thought he was untouchable in Thailand, but border control proved much tougher than any bare-knuckle opponent. For Luke Atkin, there is no pro comeback and no easy retirement now. The British Board of Boxing Control has already stated that no license will be granted while his criminal sentence looms. His former gym coaches are forbidden for speaking about the man they once trained, and the boxing world has mostly moved on to newer stars. If there was any last gasp of boxing redemption in Atkin, it was suffocated long ago by his choices. Now he is simply prisoner number 96752, or whatever number the jailers assign, learning to keep his gloves tucked away forever. But here's the thing. Luke Atkin wasn't the first fighter to trade gloves for the game, and he definitely won't be the last. Across the globe, the line between sport and crime has always been thinner than we like to admit. Combat sports in particular has this strange magnetism, attracting people from hard-up backgrounds, offering them structure, purpose, and outlet. But for many, especially those who don't hit that £1 million payday, the road from fight night to felon is just a wrong turn away. And why is that? Why do so many fighters, trained athletes with discipline carved into their bones, end up running rackets, guarding grow houses, or even leading criminal crews? The answer lies somewhere between desperation and design. Fighting is survival, it's strategy, it's about sizing up risk, seizing moments, outthinking your opponent, and keeping your hands steady when everything's falling apart. Sound familiar? That's exactly what makes the best gang leaders. The streets recognize that. They always have. You look back through history and the list starts to grow. Ricardo Mayorga, once a WBA and WBC world champion, wild in the ring, wilder outside of it. Post-retirement, he got dragged into multiple charges involving assault and possession. Then there's Teofilo Stevenson, the Cuban Olympic boxing legend. While he never got wrapped up in crime himself, many of his protégés did after retiring in poverty. In Eastern Europe, countless ex-MMA fighters have been tied to smuggling and racketeering operations. Even in Brazil, former jiu-jitsu champions have been known to moonlight as enforcers for drug factions, bringing their chokeholds from the mat to the alley. And then there's Daniel Kinahan, not a fighter, but a man who cast a massive shadow over boxing. We also covered the story about the Kinahans on our channel, so make sure to click the link on the screen right now. Daniel Kinahan was once heralded as a key figure in the sports promotion scene. Kinahan's name became toxic after authorities linked him to Ireland's most dangerous crime family. His ties to elite fighters, including world champions, sparked a global controversy. It forced boxing promoters to back away, but it also reminded everyone how close the sport still lingers to its darker roots. How the same man funding title fights might also be funding turf wars. Even the UK has no shortage of names. Over the last 2 decades, dozens of amateur fighters, some with national potential, have quietly slipped into criminal life. It's rarely dramatic. It's not like one day they throw a punch and the next they're moving kilos. It starts slowly. A gym mate introduces someone, a favor's asked. Hold this, drive that. Suddenly they're making more money in a week running drops than they did in a year of local matches. And just like that, the gloves get traded for burner phones. The sad part is, for most of them, crime isn't a backup plan, it's plan A. Boxing or MMA is the side hustle, the cover story. You fight on weekends, train in the evenings, but the real money comes after dark. It's a harsh truth, but a real one. Fighting gives you the skills, the streets give you the incentive, and if you're not careful, one starts to blur into the other. But Luke Atkin? He wasn't just some kid caught in the tide. He didn't stumble into the game. He engineered it. The same way he approached his fights, controlled, focused, tactical, was the same way he ran his criminal life. Atkin wasn't just using his fists to make money. He was building networks, managing logistics, and covering his tracks. Other fighters get used. He took control. That's the difference. He didn't just do a few side runs for extra cash. He became the machinery. Behind the scenes, encrypted messages, clean drop routes, shifting shipments through Europe. This was a man playing chess while others played checkers. But when the walls closed in, he didn't panic. He vanished. That wasn't fear. That was preparation. He knew it was coming. He saw the case building before anyone else did. The moment he was granted bail, he started slipping away, move by move. He left no note, no trace, just silence. A ghost with a passport. Compare that to most fighters turned criminals. They stay local, get caught quick. A traffic stop, a text message, someone flips. But Atkin planned it like a career move. Thailand wasn't a last resort, it was the final play. And that's what makes his story so haunting, because it shows you how someone can take everything the sport teaches, the discipline, the grit, the patience, and flip it, turn it inside out, and build something criminal with the exact same tools. It makes you wonder how many others are doing the same. How many fighters right now are living double lives, training during the day, dealing by night, not just chasing a dream in the ring, but stacking cash under the table. And when the pressure hits, when retirement looms and the title fights don't come, do they walk away or go deeper? The scary thing is, for a lot of them, crime feels safer, more predictable. You know the rules, you know the players. And if you're already doing good at taking hits and hiding pain, the street rewards that. People respect it. But respect in that world comes with a cost, one that Atkin is now paying. Locked away in a high-security prison surrounded by walls that don't care about belts or boxing history. So yeah, it's true. Fighting has always walked hand in hand with risk, whether it's in the cage or the corner of a dimly lit alley. But Luke Atkin's fall wasn't inevitable. It was chosen. That's what sets him apart. He had offers. Coaches believed in him. He had a shot at redemption after prison. He even had promoters ready to vouch for him if he cleaned up. But he walked away from all of it, not because he had to, because he wanted to. And that's the legacy. Not the titles, not the fights, but the fact that when given a chance to rebuild his life through the sport that raised him, Luke Atkin looked back and chose the shadows instead. So what can we make of this unbelievable journey? From ruthless ring hero to fugitive drug lord, Luke Atkin's tale raises questions about loyalty, risk, and how far a person can fall. Some sympathize, saying he had nothing to lose after fighting for respect as long as he did. Others point out that for every escape artist like this, many lives are ruined by the drugs he traded. As viewers were left to judge, was he a victim of circumstance or just greedy? Either way, Britain will not forget the story of the boxer who thought himself untouchable, only to learn the hard way that no matter how far he ran, the long arm of justice was always just a punch away. Was he a modern-day Robin Hood of Yorkshire, or just a common criminal with a badass story? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this in-depth look at one of the UK's most jaw-dropping crime stories, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next video.